When we think of family, we imagine a space built on love, trust, and sacrifice. But sometimes, even in the closest relationships, lines blur between care and control, between helping and hurting. This is the story of a mother who took her child's savings, saying it was for emergencies, and how life turned in an unexpected way when the real emergency came, for her. Imagine being a young adult, maybe just starting college or working your first job. You save every little bit you can, skipping things you want, planning ahead, building security for yourself. Those savings represent independence, effort, and pride. Now picture your mother, someone who's always been your protector, asking you to trust her with that money. She says it's for emergencies, to keep it safe, or maybe to use only if something serious happens. Out of love and trust, you hand it over, because she's your mom, and you believe she'd never betray that trust. Time passes. Life moves forward. You're older, facing your own financial challenges. Maybe you need money for rent, education, or an opportunity you've worked hard for. You go to your mom, ask for your savings back, expecting relief. But instead, she hesitates. She says softly, "There was an emergency. I had to use it." In that moment, the world feels a little heavier. It's not just about the money, it's about the trust that was silently broken. This situation is more common than people realize. Research on family financial behavior shows that about 1 in 4 adults have faced financial conflict with close relatives, often due to borrowed money that was never returned. Within families, especially in middle and lower income households, parents using a child's savings is not rare. Around 30% of parents admit to using funds set aside for their children, often with the intention to repay it later, but without any clear plan. The emotional impact of this, however, lasts far longer than the financial loss itself. The psychology behind it is complex. Many parents see family money as shared money. What's yours is ours. They've spent years providing, sacrificing, and supporting, so they feel justified in using what's available when times get tough. They might think, it as just temporary, or I'll give it back when I can. But to the child, those savings are a symbol of effort, something earned independently. When that's taken without consent, it doesn't feel like sharing. It feels like being robbed by someone you love. This kind of financial betrayal triggers emotions that run deep: hurt, guilt, anger, confusion. Family therapists describe it as an emotional fracture that changes how a person views not only money, but relationships. When someone close violates financial trust, the brain processes it similarly to emotional betrayal. It becomes hard to trust again, even in unrelated situations. Years later, when the mother faces a real emergency, say a health crisis or financial collapse, the emotional tables turn. The same child who once felt wronged now stands in a position of power. The question becomes painfully complex. Should they help the person who once took from them, or should they protect themselves and the boundaries they learned the hard way? This moment captures a deep moral conflict between love and resentment, duty and justice. Statistically, most people still choose compassion. Studies show that even after financial betrayal, around 70% of adults would still help their parents in times of crisis. That's because family love runs deeper than logic. But that doesn't erase the pain. Emotional wounds don't vanish simply because time passes or emergencies arise. When we look at this situation more broadly, it's not just about one family. It's about how generations handle money and trust differently. For many parents from older generations, family meant collective survival. Everyone helped everyone, and money belonged to the family as a whole. But for younger generations, especially those growing up in unstable economies, financial independence represents identity and control. So when a parent crosses that boundary, it's not seen as an act of survival. It's seen as a betrayal of individuality. Behavioral economists explain this through something called the trust deficit. Once someone close breaks a financial agreement, the relationship dynamic changes permanently. Even if love remains, cooperation weakens. In families, this often shows up in subtle ways. Children start keeping their finances private, avoid sharing plans, or hesitate to seek help. It's a defense mechanism born from broken trust. In our story, the mother likely didn't mean harm. She probably faced pressure, maybe a medical bill, debt, or some crisis she couldn't handle alone. But instead of asking openly, she took quietly, hoping to fix it later. What she didn't realize was that by protecting the family financially, she was damaging it emotionally. Because money, in this case, wasn't the only currency. It was a symbol of trust. When her own emergency comes years later, the situation feels poetic, almost cruel. The child is forced to revisit every old feeling, the disappointment, the loss, the guilt. Helping now isn't just about money, it's about forgiveness. Every decision carries the weight of the past. At that point, both sides have changed. The mother might finally understand what her actions meant, and the child might finally understand why she did what she did. But forgiveness is never easy. Some find peace through compassion, realizing that love is stronger than resentment. Others can't forget, not because they lack empathy, but because trust once broken rarely feels whole again. From a financial literacy perspective, this story highlights a simple but powerful truth. Families often avoid honest conversations about money. In many households, talking about finances feels uncomfortable or disrespectful. Yet, it's that very silence that leads to misunderstandings and resentment. Data shows that families who regularly discuss budgeting and emergency planning are far less likely to experience internal financial conflict. This situation also reflects how emotional and financial stress intersect. Studies on financial behavior reveal that when families face economic strain, emotional reasoning takes over logical decision-making. A parent under pressure might not consider long-term consequences. They just focus on surviving the moment. Unfortunately, those short-term choices can leave long-term emotional damage. And yet, despite everything, when an emergency really comes, love usually wins. Children still show up for their parents, not because they've forgotten, but because somewhere deep inside, they still care. But those moments carry a lesson, a realization that love doesn't mean blind trust, and responsibility doesn't mean silence. The reality is, no one comes out of such a story unchanged. The parent learns that trust isn't a given, it's earned and fragile. The child learns that boundaries are necessary, even with the people they love most. Together, they face the quiet truth that emergencies will always come. But how we handle them defines who we are. Financially, emotionally, and morally, this story is a mirror for many families. It shows that the biggest emergencies aren't always about money. They're about communication, honesty, and the invisible balance between love and responsibility. Because when trust breaks inside a family, it doesn't just affect the wallet, it reshapes the heart. And sometimes the hardest lessons about love are the ones we learn when an emergency finally arrives.